Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Frank's amazing podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agino. The New York Mets wrapped up their four-game series against the Miami Marlins, and it was a sweep by the New York Mets, winning all four games and now riding a nice six-game winning streak. A lot of takeaways from the series, but the main takeaway is that the Mets actually played really well. And you want to say, oh, but Frank, it was against the Miami Marlins. Marlins have had one of the worst records in all of baseball. They're not trying. They're tanking. They don't have any good players. You're right. But here are some counterpoints. Number one, the Miami Marlins have been playing better recently, especially in the second half compared to their really, really bad first half. Another thing, the Miami Marlins are always going to give it their all against the New York Mets. They're going to try extra hard because it's in the division, and I don't know, maybe Don Mattingly doesn't like the Mets or whatever, but whether the Mets are a good team or a bad team, the Marlins always play them tough. Even if you go back to the years in '08 or '09 or '07, where the Mets were trying to at least get to the playoffs, it looked like they were going to make it, and they had their epic collapses, but in those last few games in September, the Marlins were still playing the Mets tough and beating the Mets. So you want to say, and these Marlins teams are different than those, but the same concept. The Marlins were not very good. The Mets had a better record than the Marlins. But no matter what, the Marlins always played the Mets extremely tough, and regardless of that, the Mets were still able to sweep them. The other thing, on Thursday, when I'm recording this, the Miami Marlins beat the Atlanta Braves. The final score was either 8-1, 9-1, or whatever, with Dallas Keuchel pitching. So that's really fascinating. All the times we talked about, hey, get Dallas Keuchel in here. He could really give the Mets a boost in the starting rotation. And he's ended up not having a good year. And the same for Craig Kimbrell. I mean, real quick as an aside, in the earlier podcast when Kimbrell was still available, I was constantly talking about him. I was saying, the Mets really need to pick this guy up. They have so many bullpen struggles. He would be perfect. But so far with the Cubs, Kimbrell's ERA is not looking pretty, and he's also now on the injured list. So neither one of those signings would have been the smartest things out there. And another big thing that happened, because we're pretty much going to do this as modern or current as we can, but the Mets signed Brad Brach today, which I'm very, very happy about because that is something I've also been talking about. Even though it's been a rough go for Brad Brach this year, ERA in the sixes, not the all-star he once was with the Baltimore Orioles, but from what I've read, the analytics still say that Brad Brach, there's still, work to be done in there, that he still has what made him good as far as fly ball rates and strikeouts and all these different things. So maybe with the help of Phil Regan and being a New Jersey native and being on a team that's really hot and excited and pumped up with a really good fan base, that might get Brad Brach to be closer to where he was before, which was a good reliever. And like I've said before, the bullpen improvements, it's going to be very hard to get it from within. I do not think that all of a sudden Tyler Bachelor or Jacob Rame or Paul Sewald, Daniel Zamora, all these other minor league relievers I've talked about, I don't think any of these guys are all of a sudden going to become bullpen saviors and become really big pieces for the Mets going forward that will help them secure a wild card spot. I think there's a much higher chance of Brad Brach bouncing back and providing that boost that the Mets need in the bullpen to make them an even better team. The other big problem that the Mets have had, and if there was one real big thing to take away on the negative side, was the performance of the New York Mets bench. Especially offensively, it was completely terrible. They got maybe one hit, a double by Altair late in the fourth game of the series. But other than that, Guillorme did nothing. Daniel Faria is on a very big 0-4 streak. Obviously, we know Tomas Nido has been on a big 0-4 streak. And then Altair, finally he gets a hit. And Juan Lagares, he has not been hitting all year. So all those things are definitely major problems for the Mets. And now I saw on Twitter, it's not been by every source, but I did see one place that said the New York Mets have signed Joe Panik once he clears waivers on Friday. I think that's going to be a perfect signing, and it definitely will give the Mets a boost. Another guy, Queens native, and he should be a guy that will fill in that second base void that is now there from the Robinson Cano injury and the torn hamstring. I know that we talked about how bad Cano had been all year and how he'd been bringing the Mets down and all that. But here's the thing. Robinson Cano, you're actually missing him now because right as he got hurt, he was finally starting to hit a little better. And the problem is that the replacement for Cano has not been good at all. Like I just said, Guillorme and Daniel Faria struggling so much. if the Mets do indeed sign Joe Panic, it's also been a rough year for him, averaging the 230s, but he's still young enough. And again, you're hoping that being in a playoff race, being from New York, that it will just motivate him to get closer to the player he used to be. Another big thing that I saw, because excuse me, I'm actually really glad that I decided to record this podcast on Thursday because so much has happened, but also saw something that Brandon Nimmo may be close to returning for the New York Mets, and I believe that that would be a major, major boost, because here's the thing. One of my big main takeaways, positive, from this 4-game set and just the second half in general and all the winning that the Mets have done recently, is that the Mets now have a young core of position players that are just really, really good hitters. And that core is Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto, J.D. Davis, and Ahmed Rosario. Those 5 guys have been really good lately, and I just believe that McNeil doing this year what he did last year and even improving, the emergence of Pete Alonso as a rookie, hitting a ton of home runs. He's hit a home run in 3 straight games, in this Marlins series. We'll see if that streak continues against the Nationals this weekend. Really big series, but J.D. Davis, now that he's gotten full-time playing time, he's now batting over 300. Ahmed Rosario's average is in the 280s, and Michael Conforto's got a little bit of a home run streak. He's been hitting a bunch of home runs lately, having a really crazy second half, reminiscent to the September he had of last season. So as of right now, you have those 5 young guys doing really good. You have Wilson Ramos improving, so that's 6 position players. Todd Frazier, he comes and goes. He gives you a lot of offers. Wasn't that good in the Miami series, but he has gotten some big hits for the team this year, all year, whether it's a game tying or go-ahead hit. He got a big hit against the White Sox and what have you. But the other thing is that other position, that 8 spot, who's it going to be? The Mets have been rotating it so far. It's been Guillorme, it's been Echeverria, it's been Lagares, and none of these guys have gotten it done. But I just believe that Brandon Nimmo could be another young core piece that you add him to that mix. All of a sudden, the Mets have a pretty nice lineup. If Brandon Nimmo could go back to the guy he was last year, or somewhat close to the guy last year that just gets on base a ton, it could open more possibilities for the Mets with all the speed he has. Because if you have Nimmo getting on base a lot, and you got Jeff McNeil getting on base a lot, when Conforto and Alonso are hitting those home runs, there's a higher probability that they're going to hit more 2-run homers, 3-run homers, even grand slams. One of the things that I liked about in the final game of the series on that day game was that the Mets were hitting a lot of 2-run homers, driving in other guys from the young core. Michael Conforto would hit a 2-run homer that would knock in Jeff McNeil, or Jeff McNeil would hit a 2-run homer that would knock in Steven Matz. So if you have more guys on base, like I said, when you hit home runs, you have a higher probability of not just getting 1 run, but multiple runs. And again, it just gives the Mets lineup more possibilities. And instead of getting nothing that you're getting from Luis Guillorme or Echeverria, Lagares, you're now getting something from Brandon Nimmo. On the other side, Brandon Nimmo, before he got hurt, it was a while ago, Brandon Nimmo was not playing well, and he was not getting on base. In fact, he was striking out a ton, and the Mets were batting him leadoff, which is where he's supposed to be with the high on-base percentage that he's supposed to have, but he was leading off every game with a strikeout. So they're hoping that there's a possibility he could start a rehab assignment next week, and you just hope that within that rehab assignment, he could just, get back to where he was of getting on base. And the other good thing about Nimmo is that he could play center field. Does he belong in center field? Probably not. But Nimmo does have good speed, so he's going to have better range. And it just puts more guys in the correct position. You could put Nimmo in center. You could keep J.D. Davis in left field by default. That's where he's going to have to play for his bat. Conforto's going to move to right field, so that's a defensive upgrade. And you're going to have Jeff McNeil at second base. And I think he's perfectly capable of playing a really good second base. So you're going to improve defensively, and you're definitely going to improve offensively, because even if Brandon Nimmo is still struggling, it's better than Guillorme, it's better than Echeverria, and it's better than Lagares. And who knows? Maybe Joe Panic does well, and Nimmo could just be a really good bench piece. And it gives you 2 left-handed bats off the bench. Then you get Dom Smith back in September. All of a sudden, that Mets bench doesn't look as bad as it did. I really hope that this Joe Panic rumor I saw is actually true, because I think that Joe Panic will definitely provide more value than Guillorme or Echeverria has offensively. But the other thing that you could say is that Guillermo and Echeverria, they did have a good defensive series. There was actually one game because since there was a doubleheader and a day game after a night game, a lot of players got days off. Conforto and Rosario got the same game off. So they had to have Guillermo and Echeverria play together at second and short. And they were turning some very nice double plays. So don't get me wrong. They're good defensive players. And we know the Mets have had their defensive struggles. But they have been better in this past week. Still, you want to see the right combination you could get of these different position players, and then you add Brad Brach into the mix in the bullpen, get the right combination in the bullpen, and just keep winning games. So we will see what happens, and obviously this next series coming up is really big. But let's recap these games. Let's talk about them, give you some more specifics on how all these different things happened. So in the first game of the doubleheader, New York Mets victory 6-2 with Jacob deGrom on the mound. Now for deGrom, it was another one of these starts where early you were a little worried because they were getting a lot of, first pitch hits, line drives, and I was like, oh, because I had said going into this game, Jacob deGrom, if he's going to have a bad start, sometimes it just tends to be against the Marlins. I don't know why. It's just the way it is. So for deGrom, when you see him give up these hits and his command wasn't exactly on point and the Marlins have a run in, you're like, oh, I hope this isn't a bad start for Jake, especially because the Mets offense had not fully gotten it going yet. He ended up settling down, turning out a really nice pitching performance of 7 innings, 2 runs, 5 hits, 8 strikeouts, 94 pitches. Justin Wilson came in the 8th inning. He gave up a hit, but also struck out 2, 13 pitches, 9 strikes. And then Diaz, once again, it was not pretty, 28 pitches, and he gave up a couple base runners. The Mets had to warm up Seth Lugo, but did not need to bring him in because Edwin Diaz was able to get out of it without giving up any runs. So that's still another takeaway. Diaz and Familia, both are not perfect. I mean, they're a little better. At least they're not giving up 3 runs or not being able to get out of the outings, that they're actually able to finish the inning. That's a really big thing. You don't want to have to, like I've talked about before, of taxing the bullpen. It would have been really unfortunate if the Mets had to use Seth Lugo in this game because, spoiler alert, in the night game of the doubleheader, Seth Lugo did an amazing 6-out save. And had you used him in the first game, you probably would not have had that possibility. So it was very important for Edwin Diaz to get out of that. Jeff McNeil, he had 2 hits, a run driven in, a run scored. Rosario, 2 hits, an RBI. He struck out twice, but he also scored twice. And I think that, real quick to go back to Nimmo, since he had his struggles so far, I think it would be smart to bat him in the lower half of the order, bat him 7th, 8th, or 9th, whatever. And if he gets it going, you can put him back to the top of the order, like the way they did with Rosario. Rosario had been batting at the bottom of the order all year, batting 7th, batting 8th, but then Rosario turned it on, was getting these multi-hit games. Now they got him higher in the order, and it looks nice. But on the other side is that one of the things that has ended up happening in these games is that the Mets are literally getting all of their production at that core 5. I talked about the young players, and then the games that Wilson Ramos caught because, day game after night game and double headers. Ramos didn't catch every game in this series, but it seemed like the games where Ramos didn't catch, and I know that all the production was coming from that young core 5. And then you have it to where it's like, okay, these guys get on base, but then 6, 7, 8 doesn't drive them in. So until Panic gets here, or Nimmo gets here, or Dom Smith gets here, or anybody else, I think it's worth considering, maybe dropping Rosario back to the bottom of the order. This way you still have a good hitter at the back, but it's hard to justify moving any of these guys up because they're going to make outs regardless. But to me, I just don't like that every now and then it seems like, the Mets are giving like the 4th inning away or the 5th inning away because the 6, 7, 8 guys bat and then you have the pitcher and all those guys are instant outs. So it's just an inning right there of outs. And, it's just very, very difficult to do. And I guess they're just going to have to leave it the way it is because you want to talk about superstitions. As long as the Mets continue to win, it doesn't really matter. But that's why it's just important that they're getting some type of production. Like I said, whether it's from Panic, whether it's from Nimmo, or eventually Dom Smith, whoever it is, they just need to get something because these guys, I'll give you the stats. They literally were taking offers for the series. I have the exact numbers right here. So since Cano got hurt, Adelia Echeverria 0 for 12 with 16 strikeouts. Luis Guillorme 1 for 9. Lagares 0 for 6 with 3 walks. Altair, he had that 1 double at the end of the final game of the series. And Tomas Nido 0 for 5. And to add on, Todd Frazier 2 for 11. So literally with Echeverria, you got 0 hits. Lagares 0 hits. Nido 0 hits. 1 hit from Altair and 1 hit from Guillorme. So I'm not even joking when I say you're not getting literally anything. I mean, it's 0-4, so it's a 0. That's why, again, it's just, I'm going to keep repeating it because it is very important, because that was like the one thing that you could really point out. You're saying, okay, well, Alonso's playing well and Davis is playing well, Conforto's playing well. But as it gets to that lower half of the order, things aren't looking as pretty. But to continue with that order, Michael Conforto, he took an 0-4 with a walk in the first game. Alonso, he had 1 hit and a run scored. For J.D. Davis, he took the 0-4 but drew a walk. Todd Frazier took an 0-4 but he drew a walk. Tomas Nido going 0-4. Lagares drew 3 walks and his other at bat was a strikeout. It was crazy that they were walking Juan Lagares. 2 reasons. Number one, why are you walking Juan Lagares and his 189 average? And the other thing, Juan Lagares usually doesn't even draw walks because his plate vision is so terrible that he always swings at pitches out of the strike zone. So that was really, really fascinating. But still, very nice win for the Mets. Like I said, they turned it on later in the game. They got 2 runs in the 4th inning, 2 runs in the 5th inning. And like I said, they were able to put it away. Then in the night game, that was not nearly as pretty. You already knew that you were going to be at a disadvantage with Walker Lockett on the mound, and he finished with 4 2/3 innings of 8 hits, 4 runs, couple of walks, 4 strikeouts on 77 pitches, and he was not able to get out of it. The Mets had to go to Robert Gsellman to face Curtis Granderson with a couple runners on, and Granderson got a clutch opposite field 2-run double to put the Marlins ahead. And you're saying, oh boy, here comes another former Met haunting the current Mets. And the thing about Granderson is that his average is under 200, but still, he got a really timely hit on an unfortunate time for the New York Mets. And once that happened, the offense was not looking good. Jeff McNeil had come out of the game with a calf cramp, and you got Echeverria taking an 0-4 with 2 strikeouts, and Luis Guillorme taking an 0-4 with 2 strikeouts, and Todd Frazier at 0-1, and Nido 0-1. And you're like, this one the Mets probably aren't going to win. It's tough to win a doubleheader, especially with Lockett pitching and these guys being hurt and not playing and needing off days, all these different things. You're saying to yourself, no way the Mets are going to win. But sure enough, J.D. Davis ends up filling in for Jeff McNeil, and he had a big game because he hit a home run. And the thing about this was the Mets hit 3 big home runs in the 7th inning. They got a home run from J.D. Davis with 2 strikes. Then they got a 2-strike home run from Michael Conforto to tie it, and then a big 2-strike home run from Pete Alonso to put them ahead. And at that point, Robert Gsellman, even though he gave up that 2-run hit to Granderson, he got out of that inning, finished off the next inning. Familia got a scoreless inning, which was a shocker. And then Seth Lugo got that clutch 6-out save I talked about. And Seth Lugo right now, he is on another level. Reliever of the month in July, has been even better in August. He hasn't given up a hit in God knows how many batters. Hasn't given up a run in forever. I know what's bound to happen eventually, and I probably jinxed him and what have you. But I was just so happy that Seth Lugo was able to do that. And more importantly, that the manager allowed him to do it. I'm glad that he let Seth Lugo do the 6-out save, despite what the analytics say or him warming up in the first game. In a big game like this, I just think that this game was an example of having the value of star players. I think this is a perfect example of how these guys, J.D. Davis, Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto, are emerging into young stars before our eyes. Even though it looks like the Mets are going to lose, even though you have these other players like a Guillorme or Echeverria bringing you down, these other players are so talented that you were able to overcome it and still win the game. I understand it was against the Marlins, but it still was impressive to me. And it just reminded me of early in the season where the Mets are playing the Brewers and Josh Hader is coming in and making these terrific 6-out saves and the Mets are losing. And you're saying to yourself, man, imagine if the Mets had a reliever like that in a close game, this guy could just get a perfect 6-out save and end it right there. That is exactly what Seth Lugo did. And I just really loved watching it. So that ended up being a good game because it just looked like things were not going to go their way, but it did. And you definitely will take your wins, especially when the next game, it was a very nice 5-0 win. Zach Wheeler, 8 scoreless innings of 8 hits, a walk, 5 strikeouts. And the Mets actually let Gsellman pitch again. He did 12 pitches, 7 strikes, so he closed it out very nicely. And you could have even let Zach Wheeler pitch the ninth inning, but it's not worth it. You know what I mean? You don't want to tire Zach Wheeler out. You definitely want to keep him healthy because if you look at Lockett, and the Mets don't have any rotation depth, so you have got to keep these pitchers healthy. And the same thing for the position players. With as bad as this bench has been, you cannot lose any of those core guys. There cannot be any type of injury to J.D. Davis, to Conforto, to Alonso, to Rosario, to Ramos, even to Frazier. You cannot afford any more injuries. So you have got to play the cautious game. You've got to keep everybody healthy. Speaking of playing the cautious games, one of the other things I saw, I'll mention it because it just popped in my mind, is that Rajay Davis is someone who would be nice to see because he's better than Aaron Altair, but we have not because he had been injured. And he got pulled out of tonight's Syracuse game in the 7th inning. Now, it is unclear whether that's because they were winning 15-0 or if it was because he got injured again. I'm hoping that it was just that they were up 15-0 and the Mets could call him up and not use Altair anymore. Maybe he could turn it on, find his power again, but I think it's highly unlikely. I'd rather have Rajay Davis out there, more experienced. He gives me speed. Altair does too, but I just think that Rajay Davis has a higher chance of batting for a higher average than Aaron Altair does. I mean, the guy is batting in the zeros. So it has been just a very, very bad season for him. But McNeil multi-hit game, J.D. Davis multi-hit game, and this was the game where, again, Conforto was out and Rosario was out, but Pete Alonso hits the home run, Wilson Ramos hits a big 3-run shot. So, again, even though you have Guillorme going 1 for 4, Echeverria going 0 for 4, Lagares going 0 for 3, even Zach Wheeler going 0 for 3 with a couple strikeouts, it didn't matter because of that young core, because of McNeil, Davis, and Alonso. And this time Ramos gave you the extra contribution. So again, you look at this lineup and that 6, 8, 7, 9, however you want to call it, these guys are giving you no production. You're looking at offers and you're looking at 1 hit. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the multi-hits from McNeil and Davis. I'm looking at the home run from Alonso and the home run from Ramos. It's not even like the 1 hit that Guillorme got or the 1 hit that Todd Frazier got were home runs. Yes, Todd Frazier had an RBI hit, but still, I just think that it is very nice to finally see some position players that are doing really well for the Mets because we're so used to it being the pitching. It's like all the time. It's like we know the Mets have the pitching. They got Jacob deGrom, they got Syndergaard, they got Wheeler, they got Mets, but are they going to have enough offense? And now that you have these young stars, it looks like that's the case, and that is why, again, the Mets are back in it, half game out. They're winning. They're getting all these different winning streaks. Even though they have the 5-game winning streak, they lose to Pittsburgh. They get a 6-game winning streak. Right after that, they're sweeping the Marlins. So just a lot of nice things to see. And then in the final game of the series, where the Mets won 7-2, this was another game where you had Steven Matz on the mound. Wasn't pretty. I mean, he gave up 7 hits and a couple walks, a lot of base runners. He almost got out in the 7th inning, but the Mets decided to go with Justin Wilson, who gave up a hit immediately, but still was able to get another batter out. Jeurys Familia, another scoreless inning, and then Luis Aguilar, a scoreless inning. So, listen, if the Mets could get an improved Jeurys Familia and improved Edwin Diaz with the addition of Seth Lugo, with the starting rotation going deeper into games, with the young core doing well, with Ramos giving you some production, maybe Frazier gives you some production, and then you just get some health and production from the bench, see what Joe Panic does if he's here, see what Brad Brach does, all of a sudden, you know what? The Mets really kind of get a wild card spot. I now believe that they're capable of it. My feelings could change based on that weekend series against the Nationals. But again, after watching the Marlins blow out the Braves and just understanding that the Marlins have been better in the second half, knowing that the Mets always seem to lose to the Marlins, whether the Mets are good or bad, and knowing that these hitters are just good. Like Jeff McNeil is a great hitter no matter who they're playing against. Pete Alonso is a great power hitter. Michael Conforto is a great power hitter. Ahmed Rosario has improved no matter how you slice it, and so has J.D. Davis. So these guys aren't going to play as crazy against the Nationals or the Braves or the Phillies or the Cubs or whatever, but they still are, I feel, going to play well enough, and I definitely know that the starting pitching is going to be good enough. And again, this Friday game, it's a big game for Marcus Stroman. He needs to show that he's that guy the Mets acquired, the all-star, the next piece in that big-time starting rotation. He cannot be sweating again and not being able to get a single strike over. So all of that has to be cleared up. But in this final game of the series, I talked about the home runs, but Jeff McNeil, 2-run shot, Conforto, 2-run shot. He had 3 RBIs for the game, 3 runs scored for the game, and 2 hits. Pete Alonso with the 2-run homer, J.D. Davis a hit, Wilson Ramos a multi-hit game. And that's the other thing. Ramos is getting back to himself, not just hitting a bunch of ground balls at shortstop at third base. You think about the home run against Pittsburgh, the home run against Miami, both of them going to the opposite field. That is very, very good because, again, that means he's not hitting these ground balls and these double plays to shortstop or third base. So definitely improvement there. And then Alonso, I think it's important talking about him because I was getting concerned because, like I said, after the home run derby, second half, his average was significantly lower. Not that same, that same guy that he was in the first half. Now he's got this little home run streak going, and you're saying to yourself, all right, the Mets have something going. Real quick, scoreboard watching, Giants are up 3-0 on the Phillies with the bases loaded. So, the Mets are going to be even closer in that wild card race. Again, so it's like the Mets aren't even playing today, and they're getting helped out by these other teams. And here's the other thing. I mean, I don't want to overreact. I probably shouldn't say this yet, but I'm going to say it anyway because it comes to mind. If the Mets do have a nice series against the Nationals, they will be playing the Braves next. I may go to one of those games. I am going away next week. I might be in Atlanta for one of these games. If they play well against the Braves and they play well against the Nationals, they could get closer in the division. I know it sounds crazy, but it's just that with this rotation, I've talked about this before, you have a chance in every single game. You have a chance to win every game. And if you're getting this much production from the offense, from the young guys, and like I said, Ramos, I'm not going to keep repeating myself, but you just have a chance to actually be a good team. It's why the Mets are above 500. It is why the Mets are a hot team. They're getting the back pages of the newspaper. They're being talked about nationally, whether it's on ESPN or MLB Network, all these different things. The Mets, they've just become this very popular, exciting team. The crowd is back into it, and we should be because as Met fans, we are just so desperate for some winning. It comes so rarely. We have to soak it all in because we never know what's going to go away. We saw the team go to the World Series in 2015, barely make the wild card in 2016, and have been awful since. We thought that this year was another terrible year. I know I did. I said a long time ago the Mets are dead. I know the year is over in June, all these different things. But you know what? They've proved me wrong, and they're back in it. And I just hope that they don't give us a letdown on this weekend series against the Nationals. And it's not going to be easy. The first game of the series, Steven Strasburg against Marcus Stroman. The Mets never do good against Strasburg. Yes, this is a different lineup. We'll see what happens. I hope they win that game. It would just be more reassuring to the doubters. I still have my doubts. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but the people that are saying, they just beat the Padres who stink, and the Pirates twice who stink, and the White Sox who aren't any good, and the Marlins who are really bad. Well, listen, we beat the Nationals, who are also a very hot team. They currently hold one of those wild card spots, and it's going to be against, the bulk of their rotation. I know Max Scherzer is missing the series, but you're going to face Strasburg, then you're going to face Patrick Corbin, their third best pitcher, and you're going to face Anibal Sanchez, one of their better pitchers. So it's definitely going to be right in the meat of the Nationals lineup. I saw Anthony Rendon left the game, their last game, in the middle of the week. Will he be available for the series? Probably. If he's not, that definitely helped the Mets out a lot because Rendon is a really, really good hitter. And like every National, gives the Mets a tough time. And I was looking at the Nationals lineup, and it's not that scary. But one of the things they did do that the Mets did not was that the Washington Nationals signed Asdrubal Cabrera. Very frustrating. I obviously wanted Asdrubal Cabrera because I know that he provides value to this team. I've talked about it before, but he could play second base, third base, probably can't play shortstop anymore, but he's going to give you his all, and he's played well in a Mets uniform before. Not that that necessarily means much because we've seen guys be good Mets and then all of a sudden be bad Mets. You think Jeurys Familia is the perfect example. But I just think it was low risk, potentially high reward because of, like I've talked about, with the struggles of Guillorme and Echeverria. And I really hope that this Joe Panic rumor is true and that he's going to be a member of the New York Mets. And again, that him and Brad Brach are going to provide value. For Saturday, the Mets will have Noah Syndergaard going up against Patrick Corbin. And if you remember the last time Patrick Corbin played against the Mets, J.D. Davis was mashing a bunch of home runs against them because J.D. Davis is his lefty specialist. He beats up on lefties, and particularly Patrick Corbin. And J.D. Davis is swinging a hot bat right now, so you're hoping that he's going to be a big piece and that your other right-hander, Pete Alonso, is going to continue his home runs. The improved Rosario, Frazier, you get what you get. Ramos is improved. McNeil is just as hot as ever, back to leading all the baseball and batting average. So, again, now you got these pieces let's see if Mickey Callaway can put it all together. I definitely have my concerns about him. You know what I mean? I don't love that he brings in a certain pitcher here or that he keeps sticking with the same lineup. And is this the right time to make a double switch? You know, all the different things that Mickey Callaway does that I either agree with or disagree with. You know, will he find the correct combination to beat the Washington Nationals? And then on Sunday with Jacob deGrom on the mound, you really expect to win that game, even though, like I said, the Mets don't always score a lot of runs for Jake. But because the offense is hot, it's going to be at home, and the fans are just going to be so into it. I really believe that the Mets are just going to feed off this energy, because one of the other takeaways that I've noticed is that because this team is just young and they just have a lot of energy. These are very energetic players. I mean, you watch Pete Alonso hit the go-ahead home run, and he's just going crazy going around the bases. Super pumped up, and the crowd's really getting into it. And Jeff McNeil has a lot of energy, and you see J.D. Davis doing some dances in the dugout. And we know Ahmed Rosario's got a ton of energy. So all of a sudden, this has just become a young, exciting, must-watch team. And again, it's been against really bad competition. I fully understand that, but you cannot deny that the Mets are definitely improved because, again, they were losing to the Marlins earlier in this year, and they've lost them in years past, whether the Mets are good or bad. So I do think that the Mets are kind of for real, and I'm just really excited to see what this National Series is about so we can, finally decide, are the Mets for real or were they just beating up on bad competition? And again, can the Mets really take hold of a wild card spot and maybe make a run to the division? You never know. Pete Alonso said they could do it. He believes. So, maybe as fans we should try to have hope. That's why we'll say we're not going to necessarily believe and guarantee it, because then we have the possibility of being let down and maybe the Mets do not perform well against this better competition. But we will see what happens. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to like it, subscribe, leave me a comment, let me some feedback how I'm doing, because I want to make this as enjoyable for you guys, enjoyable for me. We could talk about the Mets, be excited about maybe some October baseball. That's the whole goal. Discuss it, see how they can improve, how I can improve, and eventually we will get into other sports. Just give me some time working on some new things. Obviously, you see the new background, new camera, all these different little things. So have a good one, everybody. God bless. See you next time.